And we're back. All right, Dave, let's get into the top gaming news of last week. Not a lot of stories on the docket this episode, but we will start with, I always hate to start with something sort of like bad, sad news. And looks like Microsoft is cutting 10,000 jobs across the company, just in total. But it does affect the gaming division because a lot of those cuts are going to include cuts from 343 and Bethesda.
And there it is.
Right? So,
there it is. That is the tie-in. If there's one good thing about this episode is that on episode 343, we are talking about 343 Studios. All right. So
they have a lot. They're having a lot of turnover anyway, right? Because like one of the heads of 343 just stepped away from there, right? I forgot his name.
Joseph Staten.
Joseph Staten.
He was a big influence on that game's success. He helped turn that game around. He was on the team for a little bit, and he left. He left for a number of reasons. He clapped back on Twitter.
But I think he didn't leave. He didn't leave Microsoft. I think he just left 343.
He ended up getting moved around and whatnot. Yeah. But developers ended up clapping back over this whole entire thing, saying management was to blame for the game's failure. Their kind of ineptitude and whatnot. There's a lot of drama online about this. I feel for the devs because they had a very rocky launch. The game was delayed a whole entire year because of a bad E3 demo or trailer, I should say, which the infamous Craig came out of, right? Craig the Brute. And apparently single player got completely gutted more or less. They had a whole big DLC campaign or whatever that was headed up by Bonnie, what's her name, right? She was one of the head story writers, I think, or leading up the single player team, and she ended up leaving, and then they ended up shelving that thing, and I think now that's just been canceled. Management, I think, was saying
Bonnie Ross.
Bonnie Ross, she was kind of integral to the team. So they had that whole single player thing that got shelved, saying that development was taking too long, it was too complex, and I think also they were having a hard time trying to monetize all this stuff, even though it was DLC and whatever else, but it was just costing too much to do that. So they're now focusing on the multiplayer. So that part sucks. That part sucks.
Well, I want to just clarify. I want to clarify something. I know you said you feel really bad for the devs. I feel really bad for everybody, all 10,000 people who got cut. Not just
for sure.
The devs. I'm sure there are office people who were cut as well. But it really sucks for Bethesda, right? You get swallowed up by this huge company and publicly traded company, because Bethesda was a private company, by the way. And then they have cuts, and I don't know, they didn't really specify how many people got cut. I know 343 got hit hard, but Bethesda themselves, a lot of people from Bethesda lost their jobs. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this story was they're making room for Activision. It's that was the first thing I thought. That obviously not the case in this sense, because Facebook and Google are following suit in making massive layoffs.
There are a lot of cuts.
So this is sort of just in the tech industry alone, there's a lot of huge companies are
so I know that I know a couple of things about the Google and Facebook stuff, at least, and other companies are also jumping on board, but those are the most notable. Google wants to focus on AI, which has blown up in the last couple of months, right? We have, I don't know if you fucked around with ChatGPT at all, but
never
heard of it. It's I don't know if it's not quite fully AI, but it's basically trained on a data set from 2021. So any available information on the internet, it's maybe a year and a half old or whatever, but you can basically give it a prompt and it'll spit it out. So if we went on ChatGPT and we said, "Hey, can you make a script, or can you make an episode of Rated G for Gamers?" they would go through all of the content that's like online if it was written, or if there was I think it may go through video content or whatever too, but it'll use all the available data, put an episode together that is very convincing, and then you can take that and refine it. So you can have a conversation with it and go, okay, but now make it into like a Shakespearean play or whatever, right? And it would take that and turn it into a Shakespeare play, and it would be pretty convincing. It's crazy. Not to mention the Midjourney stuff and the OpenAI, where you can just give it text prompts and it'll make this beautiful art out of it, which is also amazing. Like, you can create some crazy stuff, and then you just have like, you have unique custom art that came out of some text prompts. And I think that's where they want to focus. So that's partially why Google's doing that. And I think with how bad Meta's doing, I think Facebook needs to like kind of refocus its efforts, and they probably had some layoffs and some moving around and whatnot. So like, I get all that, but it's interesting you mentioned the Activision Blizzard thing, because I was taking the opposite approach, right? Like granted, everyone's like tightening their belts and all that, but I thought that Microsoft maybe was laying off people because they may not get Activision Blizzard. You know what I'm saying? Because like,
oh, gotcha.
If they end up getting them, they have to spend a lot of money, but they will make that up over time, right? That gets factored into their like budgets 5, 10, 20 years out, right? Here's our growth chart. So they like know that, well, okay, we don't need to necessarily fire anybody because we can make sure all these games come out and they're monetized properly and whatever else. Like, they can kind of make all that back up. I was thinking like, well, we don't know if this is going to come through, and we need to cut some fat. So I don't know. It sucks right now.
Either way, it sucks, and it's scary, right? Because you think about it. I know, those people who lost their jobs at Bethesda never thought that they would lose their jobs, but you get swallowed because you get swallowed up by a huge company. You're like, okay, they can afford to have all of us on, right? So if you work at Activision Blizzard and you get swallowed up by Microsoft, they may have to trim some fat, right? Because they spent $68 billion on you.
Well, yeah, and you get job redundancy, right? So they have to get rid of people in duplicate positions, right?
So that's kind of scary. But